Good day, dear students. Welcome to our program for counseling and learner support. This is the program for ACS, ACP, DPP, DJP, DE, DES, and CLS 12. All these programs or courses can make use of this presentation. My name is Aina Simpson. I am going to be your tutor, and my contact numbers are 081 24 57 456. My email address is ainasimpson in small letters as one word @gmail.com. Welcome to Counseling and Learner Support subject content. We are informed of what counseling is, and I expect you to be hardworking, dedicated student, self-driven, not waiting for anybody to say, get up, study, and so on. And this presentation will take you through the subject content as well as few common mistakes noticed in the previous examinations or assignments. The module or the study guide has covered the following. As a teacher, you are expected to understand the well-being of a child. Before you tell yourself you are going to work with the child, you must first understand who the child is and what type of needs this child at least need. Information learned in this module should help us to understand the whole child, or it should give us the whole overview of the child, how the child behave, and also how the child learn, and how can we assist the child. Educational institutions need to counsel and support learners to promote emotions and skills that enable learners to benefit most from their education. There is need for us to understand why counseling is a very important subject, because without counseling, you cannot tell yourself you are able to assist the child, because here we are taught techniques and ways how to assist the child after we have learned who the child is. Counseling and learner support services helps learners to understand themselves better and also to discover their personality, abilities, and develop goals. So as a learner, they also need to understand themselves. What is it that they are good at as a human being? And then for them to achieve certain areas, they need to set goals, or they need to develop goals in order to help themselves. Work assessed are not only aimed at assessing module factual knowledge, but also assessing the ability of the students to apply knowledge in practical situations. Now, when we are talking of assessment, assessment can be examination, assessment can be assignments. It's not only to find out what do you know. It also assists and assess the student to know whether you can apply your knowledge. Let's say you are given a scenario of assisting a child in your classroom. You cannot always memorize what you have read. You need to understand and put your understanding, which is your knowledge, into practice. Students need to know the exit learning outcomes and the exercises of each unit, and as they will prepare students towards any form of assessment. When we go through our module, each unit has learning exit outcomes. Basically, this is telling you what does the unit entails. You must understand that part first, and as you go through the unit, you will realize that there are some activities that are put at the end of the unit or somewhere in the middle of the unit. The whole idea is, after you have read or you studied some parts and you come across such questions, the idea is to help you to revise your work you ask yourself this, you read this question which is asking you a certain part of the question, and try to understand or to remember what you have studied, whether you can remember or not. That is the whole idea. And in such way, you prepare yourself more and you understand the work more. And my advice to you is that should you read this question and you are unable to answer it fully, or you cannot remember anything, the bottom line here is you go back, start again, read and read with understanding, so that you are able to answer these questions. Know the meaning of the action verbs in the study guide, and in order to understand the question's demand. In this way, you will know what is expected of you when you answer the questions. When we are talking of action verbs, these are keywords in the questions. So if you are asked to discuss, or you are asked to describe, or to analyze, or to demonstrate, or tabulate a form, and so on, you need to understand. If you understand these verbs, then at least you are able to give the correct answers. So it came to my attention that some questions, when a student is asked to discuss, of course they say 2-3 points and then it ends there. If that is the case, you get the marks of what you have written. There is no way you have written 3 factors or 3 statements and you expect to receive more marks. You get what you put in. That is what basically it. So we need to understand, so that when you understand the question's demand, then at least you know how much is expected of you to give or to provide as an answer. Our assessment policy is as follows. The final pass mark, it's 50 marks. And 50 marks, how do we get it? It is calculated by 60% of the examination mark and 40% from the assignments. Meaning that in your examination, which is out of 120, you need to score at least 60%, which is half marks of the question paper. So, and the 60%, it's the half which is needed. And then when it comes to assignment, you also required to at least get minimum 40% from the assignment. Now what is going to happen at the end is that we take the 60% from, we take the 60% from examination, and then we take the 40% from assignments, put together, gives you 100, divided by 2, then you get your minimum pass mark of 50%, which I believe you can score this easily. Just put your effort on it, you will make it. And a sub-minimum of 50% is attained in examination. Right. Our examination format is as follows. It is 2 hours and half, 2.5 hours, and the marks are 120. In such examination, you expect different types of questions, which are open-ended questions that examines your understandings and applications of knowledge, skills, and ideas. Answers are to be written on the examination script. So when you go into examination, you have you receive the examination booklet. In that examination booklet, there are spaces provided, and you are required to answer into those open questions or spaces provided. Let us now look at what the study guide has for us. We are looking at learning exit outcomes. The first unit is talking about the different approaches and the phases of counseling of learners. Now, when we are looking at this, the approaches, we have different approaches. We have behavior approaches, person-centered approach, we have behaviors, we have we also have in counseling itself, then we are looking at behaviors. How do you discuss behavior? What I want to advise you as student is that when it comes to approaches, we need to read with understanding. And the easiest way, how I make it easier for myself, is that you take a page and then you write, you put your different approaches on one paper, you write columns, or you divide your page into columns, and then as you write in columns, then we need to read each approach on its own. Meaning that if you are to read behavior, you start with the introduction. Everything you read, start with introduction. It will lead you into a better understanding, because if you just read for the sake of reading, you may not understand. So once you read the introduction, it will guide you as what behavior approach is, who came up with the idea, why is it there, how is it being used in the classroom, how are the learners benefiting from this approach, and so on. So how it goes with all other approaches. And then we are looking at person-centered approach, and Carl Roger was the psychologist, American psychologist, who came up with this idea. So now when you look at it, it's just not, it's only addressing the looking at the person, not the problem the person has. And now you look at how is the person being affected by such an approach. And then you take the learners into account as to how they make use of such approach, and how can they benefit from such approach. As I said earlier, you need to start reading the information in your study guide from introduction. There is a tendency of students following the past question papers, and they start memorizing these question papers. They come across a question, they go to a question, to a page where this information is talked about, and then they copy down this information, they start memorizing the information without understanding what the information has to say. Right. And then we are looking at problem-solving approach. Is also one of the approaches. As I said earlier, we have quite a number of them: behavioral approach, self-centered, personal-centered approach. We are talking of problem-solving approach. Why is it important? So we look at how can one resolve a problem. So we are looking at steps how to solve a problem. These steps goes in a cycle. And remember, it is how to overcome obstacles and find a solution. You cannot just tell, you see a problem or you find a problem and you cannot find a solution to it. You need to make a way. Find time, make yourself understand that you need to understand the problem, and you need to find a solution to that problem, because the problem is not there to stay. The problem should be there, and you work on it, and then it's gone for good. Right. So in the 7 steps of problem solving, we look at, for you to solve the problem, how do you start? We look at, you first of all, you identify the problem. After identify the problem, you must now understand what the problem is. That is now the defining of the problem. And then we look at forming a strategy. How do you come up with the solution to the problem? And then you organize the information. So the how you found, now that you want to solve the problem, you need to organize this information. And again, allocate resources. Now that you have organize the information. How are you going to go about? You need to allocate resources. What can you use in order to what can you use in order to overcome such a problem or to find a solution to the problem? Monitor progress and evaluating the results. Now, after you have done everything, so then you look back. You look to say, okay, I have done this. Did it work or not? And if it did not work, then you go back to find out why this did not work. And then that is how it goes. Because you can't just tell yourself, I have a problem, identify what the problem is, and now I'm looking for information how to overcome this problem. That is not enough. You still need to monitor the progress, whether you have moved, moved positively or you have moved on negatively. So you monitor the progress, whether you are doing well or not. And then the final part is now evaluating the results. Now that you have done all the steps, you are looking at how are the results like. Do you need to improve on it, or you are fine, you need to move on? Right. Now we are looking at the client is responsible for improving himself or herself. The therapist creates an environment where the client feels safe and not under judgment. So these are the areas when you are looking at the problem solving, you need to understand what is it that you really need, and then you work on that. So it facilitates the opportunity for clients to define and clarify their goals and finding their own solutions to problems. It's fundamentally believed that people normally tend to move toward growth and healing. So we are looking at as a teacher in the classroom, you need to also understand, first of all, you need to understand the learners, you need to know them, and should they happen to have a problem, how do you go about? And if you decide to follow the 7 steps of problem solving, you should now know, where do I start? Now I know I have a problem, but how do you go about solving this problem? That is when you come in. And then we are looking at behavioral approach. With a behavioral approach, here it's about doing. And our behavior make us to behave in a certain way. And now when you take the behavior and as you say, it makes us to behave in a certain way. Take an example of a classroom. In the classroom, you have naughty children, you have smart ones, you have those who don't care. So all these children are in one class. But then you have to come in order to facilitate how best you understand the behavioral approach. Now we are looking at the behaviors are acquired through learning. Fine. And then we look at conditioning occurs through interaction with the environment. Now, you have now the condition, you have the environment, then you have the child. You now have 3 areas here, and you are looking at how best can you assist the child. So behavioral believes that our responses to environmental stimuli or stimuli the shape and shape of our actions. So let us look at the behavior. What does the behavior teach us? With this behavior approach, we also have learned about the conditioning. The conditioning approach, it helps us to determine whether we should treat this child positive, we should treat the child negatively, and if that's so, why? And why again do we do it? So the outcome goals of treatment are set by the clients. This is now the behavioral. So the client need to find out what is it that has to be done. It's not you as a counselor to tell the client what to do, but it's rather the other way around. You wait for the client to tell you how the client want things done for her or for him. Right. And then with behavioral approach to discipline, we also have goal-directed tasks, work better in the classroom. So the behavior approach also work better in the classroom, not only in the open. So when we talk of environment, we are not limiting ourselves to outside only. The classroom is also part of the environment. And then we look at what is it that a learner can do in this. And then we have two conditioning in this approach. What are the conditioning? The conditionings we have are the operant and the reinforcement. So we are looking at the operant is used to change overt behavior shown when teachers exercise discipline in classroom. Then we use operant. How does it work? Both approaches have objectives, and how can they be applied in classroom by teachers? And then we look at reinforcement. You need to, the child has done something, you need to appreciate or appraise the child for just to stimulate the way the child has done something, so that then you will see either the positive techniques or you will see the negative techniques. So now if we are to go by the book, we have positive in that one. We have praising, rewarding for good work or good behavior, and negative, because with this reinforcement can be either positive or negative. If it is positive, you reward the child, you praise the child. Thank you, John, for having done what. Thank you, Martha, for finishing first. You score the biggest marks or something like that. And then when we are talking about the negative ones, if you are to reinforce the techniques and you are making use of the negative ones, if it is negative that you have chosen to work on, then you simply remove what the child used to have. It is very important that we understand the positive and the negative of reinforcement. And then we move on to phases of the counseling process. With the phases of the counseling process, we are looking at what do you need to do in order to carry out counseling process. For you to carry out the counseling process, we are looking at establishing a relationship with the client. You assess, you do assessment, you need to have goals, you need to set goals, and then intervention and terminations. So you cannot tell yourself you are going to do counseling, but you do not know what are the counseling processes. And once you know them, not only memorizing them, try to understand. You establish a relationship with the client. I am quite aware that if you are to talk to a person that you don't trust, I don't think that you would tell the person the truth. But once you get to know who the person is, what you want to tell the person or what you want to do, that will help you a lot. But if you do not know the person, then you cannot. There's need for students to understand counseling process in the correct order. Why am I saying this? When I was marking, being it assignment, being it examination, this question had a problem. There were common mistakes done by students. You see, if we are talking of a process, there's no way you will cut the process in the middle. And there's no way you will start the process from the beginning and jump into the middle to the end and come up again. No, you need to know this by your heart, meaning that you also have to do away with the memorizing. Why am I saying so? Because if you memorize the work, then you may not understand. But once you understand the work, then at least you know, when I see my client, first of all, I need to know the client. We need to talk about things until the person feel comfortable, until the person feel good that, okay, I am going to do this. Or why am I doing this? Because if you do not have a relationship with a person, you can easily sit with your client, ask questions, and the person tells you, I don't know. Maybe you could easily say, what brought you here? The person will look in the 3-4 corners, roomed, and then eventually the person can easily tell you, I don't know. Now, you need to find a way of how best can you assist the students, and also the idea of counseling process, it needs to be understood, and we need to do the process, unfortunately, in the correct order. And then we have the attitude of a good counselor. When we say a good counselor, what do we look at? This counselor must be able to understand themselves. We have people who don't know who they are, why are they there, why are they doing what they are doing. All these things need to be understood. And we look at respect. You should be able to respect yourself as a counselor in order to create room for your client and any other person to respect you. Appreciate yourselves. We have this thing of looking at certain things, and then we start asking ourselves, oh, I wish I was who. I wish I had what. I wish I lived where. I wish my parents were where, who. So that is not healthy. It is never healthy. So we are looking at is not a counselor. We need to understand what type of characteristics you need to have in order for you to be confident and tell yourself, I am going to assist this particular client, because we are looking at what is it that the client needs to know. You need to have confidence in yourself. If you do not have that, then simply you cannot do counseling, unless you want to do something else, which you, in the end, you want to call it is counseling, which is not good. Then we are looking at the principles of educational rights of children or learners. Our learners, irrespective of what they have, irrespective of where they come from, what matters here is a word child or a word learner. Now that the children have the rights, what is it that you need to know? You need to understand these rights so that you are able to assist the next person. And then we are looking at the best interest of the child has to prevail. You do not do things because you want to please the child. You do this assistance, or you provide assistance simply because you want the best out of the child. You put the interest of the child before you, and then you come second. The children we have, they have rights to education, they have rights to life, they have rights to live where they want to live, they have rights to live with other people. Not for you to say, because the child is like this, we don't want to play with you. You are there to encourage other children, other learners, so that they also include the other learner into the group of other children. It should be understood that learners do have rights to education and be respected at all times. Because if you are not respected, how are you going to work with these learners? How are you going to see, I need to improve on this? How are you going to hear more from this particular learner if you do not do it in the interest of the child? We are looking at basic communication skills in the counseling process. These are skills that assist the counselor to facilitate the changes while with the client. You put yourself in the shoes of this learner or of this client. You need to be able to listen to the client. You must have those skills, and you must put you must have empathy, which is putting yourself in the shoes of the learner or the client. You must be able to listen, because at the end of the day, when you finish with the client, there is a part which you need to show the client that you listened well. By so doing, you need to retell the story that you were told, so that should there be some areas that you did not do right, the client is able to correct you before you take out wrong informations. And then this includes now what you need to have the skills for communication is that the attentiveness, you must be able to listen carefully. You must be able to put yourself in the shoes of this client. You just take a minute or a second to say, if I was this child, how would I have felt when this happened to me? So that is the empathy. You should be able to ask more questions, probing. As the client is telling you stories, you have to show that you are listening, and in the process you can also, at the end, you can also ask more questions. And there is this information which we should all know. When you are busy with the client, or when the client is busy telling you whatever happens to him or her, do not disturb. Listen, take your little notes, and when you are to retell the story, you can make use of your little notes that you have taken, and then after that, if the client feels that you did not say a certain part correctly, then the client can easily correct you or tell you, add this also. I remembered something, please add this to that. So these are the skills. And now it has come to the attention of the markers that when we have this question on phases of the counseling process and the basic skills, basic communication skills, students get confused. I do not know how and why, but I want you to understand it from this perspective that when we talk of counseling process, this is what you need to do. You do one, you build a relationship, you identify the problem, and then so it goes. But then if we are to talk about basic communication skills, these are the skills that you need to have when you are communicating with a person. When you are talking to a person, you must be able to listen, and you must be able to ask more questions. You must be able to put yourself in the shoes of this particular client. Now, and also you must be able to summarize what the client has told you. How is it possible that you mix the basic communication skills with counseling process? The process is what to do when you have the client, but the basic communication skills is what you need to have in you already so that you are able to listen. As a counselor, these communication skills should be understood and practiced. If these skills are not practiced well, unfortunately, counseling will not be performed correctly and yet not a success. Because if you can't listen properly, so how are you going to assist the client? If you can't put yourself in the shoes of the person, if you can't think of, okay, you told me this and this and this, do you think it was good, or what could you have done instead of screaming or shouting back to the person? So those are probing questions that you need to have the skills in order for you to have a great communication, basic communication skills. Right. And then we are also looking at the Namibia guidance and counseling policies. What do we have there? This includes support groups, counseling support groups. It includes the school clusters. It includes school management, regional offices. There are categories to be considered in the provision of education for learners with special needs. Now we are looking at this guidance, the policies. How do we go about counseling in a school setup? So in a school setup, we have counseling school group, support group. And then we can also look at school clusters, where we have different schools that could come together and then they sort out things. Or we can also look at the school management. There must be a member of, or in fact, all school members or school management members should be part of counseling, because in most cases when there is an issue at the school, the teacher handles the issue and take it up to the office, not necessarily to the school principal, but to the head of departments, which are members of school management. And then we are looking at with different provisions of children with learner support, for learners with special education. We need to understand, when we have such learners, where do we go? Who do we approach? That is very important. You cannot only tell yourself you can help the learner. At the end of the day, you know that you are not doing good to the child or to this particular learner, and you decide to continue. Once you decide to continue and there are no good results, then it means you are doing more damage than what is expected. Let us look at the warning signs that a teacher needs to look out for a learner who might be identified in need of counseling. Who are these learners? We are looking at a learner who will show some warning signs like emotional. The child is always crying. The child is always isolating himself or herself, sitting very far, don't want to participate in anything. And then we have social signs. The child does not want to be part of anything. So he is just there. Don't want to take part, don't want to play with others. Then we have behavioral problems where we have the child sometimes decided to become a bully. This child is just beating others. Whenever you find a certain child among other children, then one or two must cry. So if that is the case, then you need to find out, you need to examine, you need to get it at the bottom of the matter as to why is it that whenever child B is among children, then 2 or 3 children must cry. What could have been the problem there? So you need to get at the bottom of the matter, is this particular child who made others to cry. So we need, at times you will have questions that you will be asked to talk about, which are mention, you are asked to mention the signs, and then you look at if this particular child is showing or displaying these signs. How can we assist the child? What can be done for a child to at least to realize that what he is doing is wrong? And with some questions, there was so much confusion that students did not understand the question. Students tried to answer the question by only mentioning the signs, but then they forget to say what are those, the signs, the group signs, to say behavior, social, psychological, emotional. And then when it comes to, for example, physical signs and social and behavior, they cannot, students could not differentiate what belongs where. So, and then in that way, students lost marks. So you need to understand this, and you need to, first you need to group them, and in those groups, once you have their groups, then under each group, then you should know, when I talk of physical science, what could be this? Because this is where we have a child who is always beaten, or child who is always being scolded at, emotional. So the child developed to become someone else, and the child will become possibly aggressive or so. Right. With the basic counseling, there are quite a number of things that are added here, so that at least you have a variety of not only few points that you need to know, but you need a lot. Basic counseling skills, this is the communication that you need to, what are the skills that you need to have as a counselor? Okay. And then here at the bottom we say there has been a confusion between basic counseling skills and basic communication skills. So the counseling in itself, it's what you need to do, that process, and what you need to have in you. And then the communication, when you listen, as you are talking to this client, what is it that you need to know? What is it that you need to have as a person? Let us not confuse this question again. And choosing a career, knowing yourself and get to know the occupation that you may wish to take up. When we choose careers, you need to understand, you need first to know yourself. What type of person are you? And then when you realize that, when you know that you are this person, then you come into the career that, okay, I am this type of person. I can only work with people at this, in this area, and people in this area. For example, if you don't know, and for some reason you happen to like medicine. Now, medical you like, yes, but you are this type of person who cannot stand blood. How are you going to work? Because in almost every other patient, there is a wound. Either the client need to be operated, or the client need to be dressed because the person had a wound that need to be cleaned, and so on and so on. So these are the things that you need to know. So for choosing a career, you need to understand yourself, you need to know what you want, and what occupation are you able to perform. And then we look at referral procedures. Now that you have been working with the child, your client, you realize that I cannot continue with this client, so what must I do? Then, possibly, if it has to do with academic, then we look into institutions within our communities that can take a child who has a specific need. For you to refer a child, first of all, identify the type of need the child has so that you also identify the correct institution where you need to send a child. Because if the child has learning difficulties only, the child has difficulties in learning, reading, to be specific, you cannot send a child to a school which only deals with intellectually impaired children. This has to do with the brain. So, and that child is not part of that. But if you don't know and happen to send a child to that school, then it means you have done more damage to the child. And also, we do not have enough schools or enough institutions for such learners. So a very good scrutiny has to be done before the child is accepted anywhere else. But we do have different institutions or different schools like learners which cater for learners with learning difficulties. Previously it was called special education needs, and then we also have visual impaired, hearing impaired, intellectual impairments, and so on. So this should be very clear. You don't just send a child because you realize the child does not fit in our school setup, which nowadays we call mainstream. And then you realize the child does not fit here, let us transfer or refer the child to this institution or to this school. And if the information is not correct, the child will not benefit, because the child does not belong to where the child was referred to. So the educators need to be aware on how to detect the learners with learning difficulties. So it is our duty to find out and to be aware of what we need to see in such children. And then we come to holistic approach. We are looking at the whole child. Now the holistic approach, we have different circles, which are 5 of them, and these are created by Bronfenbrenner, and he looked at how can a child be assisted. We have the child in the middle, so these circles are called, or levels, they are called meso, exo, macro, and chronos system. Now, when we talk of micro, we are looking at the child and the people who are closer to the child. And meso includes the child and the people who are next to or close to. And exo, it involves the linkage between 2 systems. At least one of the system does not directly involved in the child. So if we take, for example, the parent's child is the child's parents are working at a mine, and this mine, because of economic crisis or whatever you name it, then the father is retrenched. This child is going to be affected, not possibly directly because the child is not working at the mine, but because the father, who is the provider at home, has lost the job. And then we look at macro, consists of cultural patterns, which are values, beliefs, customs, and economic and social systems. So with the macro, we are looking at the value, the culture, and so on. This also helps a child to grow. We look at what culture do you come from, what do you learn, what are you taught at home, and so on. And then we have the chronos system. This is now the very outer circle, which sometimes individual does not realize the impact of it, but it is there. And then we are looking at students are expected to understand the 5 system. Again here, I am appealing to students that should you come across such a question and you need to answer it, you study it exactly the way you see it. We cannot put macro to replace a child, because we need to start with a child, we put the child in the middle and then followed the other levels. So that is what I meant, because in previously students would answer these questions and they only have an idea that there is this word and there's that word, that word, but they don't know the order, how to arrange this. So that is very, very important. And also, when you know how to arrange this, you should know what if I say macro, what does macro consist? Not just a word that I have this level and you leave it there. And then we are looking at multidimensional model of human development. How do the person develop, a child develop? We look at physical, cognitive, and psychosocial. All these are needed. We don't just have a child who just grow out of nowhere. There must be areas that we need to look at. So when we talk of physical, we are talking of a body, how the body grow. We are talking of cognitive, that is the reasoning, the mind, the brain, and then psychosocial, that's the emotions and also the personality of a person. And then we look at now the child is growing. What are the areas influencing the child? So we have the heredity. What did the child inherit from his or her parents? Normally we hear some people talking, you look at the child and then you are like, you look like who. So that is because there is a certain resemblance from the parents that you knew, and you now associate what you have seen from their parents to this child. And then we look at the environment, the physical environment. So what do we have in the physical environment? We have people, the climate, and so on, food, and so on. So these are the areas that influence the child as the child grow. And contextual, we have the environment where we have the social factors which influence the child growth as an individual. It's very important that we understand the child grows. We have the physical, cognitive, psychosocial. Those are the domains of development. How does a child grow? And then we look at the influence on the child. The development of the child is also influenced by certain areas where we have the heredity, physical environment, we have contextual. So you need to understand this. And then we have the emotional intelligence and high and low emotional intelligence. So we are looking at people who are greatly apply the elements of emotional intelligence in a positive way in their daily life experience, display high emotional intelligence behavior. There are people who are not aware of their feelings and cannot express themselves they express themselves in an appropriate way. So you need to know who you are and what is it that you want and how do you express yourself towards other people. And then we are looking at the problem solving. Problem solving here, we are looking at something that we don't want. Nobody wants a problem. But then should the problem arise, how do we go about? We go about identifying the problem. We go about defining the problem the same way as we looked at the 7 problem solving cycle. And then we are looking at if we are to talk about problem solving, then we need to have those processes, or you need to have those steps in order, because you cannot start evaluating or monitoring the progress of something that you did not do. First, you have to start from the beginning and find out that. And then we are looking at some information here on 5 barriers that could prevent finding suitable solutions to a problem. So we are looking at we have different modules as per course as per our different courses, but then that does not mean that we do not have the information. We do, but then you look at, if you happen to be doing a different course, concentrate on what you have and then try to find out under which unit this information can be found. And then we are looking at reasons for substance abuse by learners. Our learners, they use substance. Substance includes alcohol abuse, they include cigarettes, marijuana, dacha, and so on. So we are looking at what could be the reason for any other person of this nature, of this to be involved or to take part in that. So we are looking at reasons are grouped in context of the individuals. So this basically are the individuals, because sometimes the learners want to fit in a certain group in order for them to be recognized. Then they start doing what the others are doing, friends and peers, or some they come from homes where people are using these substances, and then those could be some of the reasons. But it does not mean that what has been said here or in our book is the only answers we have. No. You can, as long as your answer can justify the correctness of the answer, then it can be acknowledged. And factors how individuals can manage money. So this is the budget. Every other person is talking about money, and you touch money almost every day. So we need to learn what is budget and how do we manage our money. That is basically it. And then we look at strategies for preventing learners from dropping out of school. We mostly hear about learners dropping out of school. What could be the problem? First, we need to know what are the problems and what forces them to drop out of school. And also we look at what can we assist. How can a school assist the learners not to drop out of school? And also we have another area where we talked about impact on the lives and the lives of learners and their learning. So if these learners have dropped out of school, there could be a problem. What could be the problem? And this problem, how does the problem affect their learning and so on? The drug abuse and alcohol abuse. So the interrelationship, we are looking at the relationship between the learner with the relative, or the learner with the peers, and the learner with the teacher, the learner with in the society. It's very important that we look at what is it that we need to understand this. And so no human being lives in isolation, so as learners cannot. So now we look at what is the relationship that these people or learners have with the different groups that has been just mentioned. And then we also came to understand that in school we have discipline. We need good discipline. When we need good discipline, we are talking of autocratic and democratic. And first we need to understand what are they, and then what do they entail. And when you have a learner who is self-disciplined, what does it mean? What does the learner do? So we need to understand those. And at times, the students confuses the two. When they want to write something about democratic approach, then they write about autocratic. When they want to write autocratic, they write democratic. And they don't even understand what is self-discipline. So when a child is self-disciplined, the child is able to work on his own without being forced to do something by someone else. And then with that, we are also looking at there are acceptable discipline techniques that you need to discipline a child, and you have to do this and that and that. So in that we have the positive ones and we have the negative ones, but they are all helping the child to come out of danger should there be any problem with this child. And then we are looking at acceptable, unacceptable discipline techniques and their consequences. There was a question on unacceptable discipline as to what are the causes of unacceptable discipline. So this question is asking you to tell what will happen when the child is going through corporal punishment almost every other day. How did this child turn out? And the student could not think of that. Instead, they talked of harsh punishment, corporal punishment, shaming, and laboring. I urge you to read and understand the question so that at least you have an idea of what the question is asking you. And then we have the nutrition. This is about food. What do children need? And then we look at some children, they fall under malnutrition, some they are overweight, and so on. We look at what is needed for a child to live in which group. And then the last part of our presentation is talking about HIV and AIDS. We need to understand the definitions, and we need to know how is it being transmitted from one person to the other, and how is HIV AIDS is impacting the community. When everyone else is sick in the community, what is going to happen, and all that. So that was the presentation we have. And then the common mistakes here, students are expected to write neatly. Some students do not write neatly at all. They write and you cannot read at all. And questions were misinterpreted. And then some statements does not make sense at all. And also, you are required to prepare your examination very well, not to come and guess should you are to answer the questions. And this presentation, it will help you also to prepare your examination for May, August, April, May, August, as well as November. There are no more examination based presentations. But otherwise, if you happen to encounter some problems, you are welcome to phone me at the given time there. And please make sure you study, and do not call 2 days before examination. I wish you well. Thank you.